She was 9 years old, sitting on the third stair with her knees pulled up, and she asked me why I was always working. I gave her the answer I'd been giving everybody for 11 years. I said, "Because I'm doing it for you, sweetheart. So you can have things I didn't have." She thought about that for a second, and then she said, in the completely reasonable voice a 9-year-old uses when they've caught an adult in something, "But I don't want things. I want you. I want to tell you I stopped. I didn't." I told her I'd be up in an hour, and she went to bed. And I closed the door of my office and worked until 11:40 that night, and I didn't come up at all. My name is Curtis Nalen. I'm 52 years old, and I had spent 11 years building something I was absolutely certain was for her. It took 2 more years, and one very bad Thursday in a conference room downtown, before I understood what my daughter had actually said to me on that staircase. By then, it had already cost me something I'm never getting back, and it wasn't the money. I need you to understand where the working came from, or you'll think I was just a selfish man, and it's worse than that. It's more common than that. I grew up in Marion, Indiana, in a house where the thermostat was a moral issue. My father, Bill Nealon, worked at a plant that made truck axles until it closed in 1987, when I was 13. I remember the year it closed better than I remember most of my 20s. Not because anything dramatic happened. Nobody yelled, nobody lost the house. What happened was quieter. My father got smaller. He'd go out in the morning to look for work, in a clean shirt, and come back at 4 in the afternoon and sit in the kitchen and not turn the light on. That's the image I carry. A grown man sitting in a dim kitchen at 4 in the afternoon because there was nowhere he was supposed to be. My mother, Dolores, went back to work at a nursing home doing overnights, and the whole architecture of our family reorganized around a fact nobody said out loud. We were now a family that could be knocked over. I was 13, and 13 is exactly the wrong age to learn a lesson, because you learn it all the way down, past the part of you that can argue with it later. What I learned was, money is oxygen, and a man who runs out of it disappears. I went to Purdue on loans and a partial scholarship. I studied accounting because it was the least romantic thing I could think of, and because you could see the jobs at the end of it, sitting there, countable. I graduated in 1996, went to work for a regional firm in Indianapolis, and I want to tell you honestly that I liked it. Not the work exactly, the safety of it. Every hour I billed was a small brick in a wall between me and a kitchen with the lights off. I met Renee in 1999, at a wedding neither of us wanted to be at. She was a labor and delivery nurse, which means she'd already seen more of the actual center of human life by 26 than I have at 52. She was funny in a dry way that took people a few minutes to catch. We got married in 2001. Maddie was born in 2004. Owen in 2007. By then, I'd made senior manager and was 3 years into a partner track, and the way that track works, the way it works everywhere, in every industry, under whatever name they give it, is that they don't ask you to work 80 hours. They just make it so the people who make partner are the people who did. Nobody ever says the quiet part. They don't have to. I made partner in 2010. I remember exactly 2 things about that day. The handshake from a man named Rich Vandenberg, who ran the office, and getting home at 9:15, and Renee had kept dinner warm, and Maddie was already asleep, and I stood in the doorway of her room for a minute in a suit and thought, this is for her. That's the sentence. That's the one that ran the next 11 years of my life. This is for her. I want to be careful here, because I've heard men say some version of this and use it as a shield. So let me say the true part. It wasn't entirely a lie. Some of it was real, but underneath the real part was a 13-year-old boy watching his father sit in a dim kitchen, and that boy was the one actually driving, and he was never going to feel like we had enough, because the thing he was trying to buy wasn't money. It was the guarantee that the floor wouldn't drop, and you cannot buy that. They don't sell it. But you can spend your entire life trying, and most people will call it ambition and admire you for it. Here's how it actually looked, day to day, because I think the day-to-day is the part that gets skipped. It didn't look like a man who was never home. That's the cartoon version. I was home most nights by 7. I sat at dinner. I went to a lot of games. Not all of them, but a lot. What I was somewhere else while being there. I'd be at the table and my phone would be face down next to my plate, and I'd have this low-grade hum going the entire meal. This awareness of the inbox, the way you're aware of a sound in a car you're going to have to get looked at. Renee would tell a story about her shift and I'd track maybe 60% of it, and I'd say the right things at the right places, and she wouldn't have been able to prove I wasn't listening. But she knew. Of course she knew. She just decided, for about 8 years, not to make it a fight every single night, because you can't. I checked email at stoplights. I checked it in the bathroom at my son's baseball games. There's a photograph Renee took at Owen's first grade play in 2013 that I keep in a drawer. And in it, I'm in the third row, and everybody else in the frame is looking at the stage, and I'm looking down at my lap, and the light on my face is coming from below. I've looked at that photo more times than is probably healthy. That's the whole thing in one image. I was there. I have the ticket stub. My son didn't have a father in that room. The other piece, and this is the one I understand better now, is what I was doing to my own body and calling it discipline. 4 or 5 hours of sleep for most of a decade. Coffee until 2, then something with sugar in it around 3:30 when the wall came. I put on 40 pounds between 2010 and 2018 without particularly noticing. The way you don't notice a tide. My doctor, a straightforward woman named Anjali Rao, told me in 2016 that my blood pressure was a problem, and my A1C was headed somewhere I wouldn't like. I told her I'd get on it after tax season. I said that in 2016, and again in 2017, and again in 2018. And I want you to notice that after tax season is a season that arrives every year and never actually ends, and that every job has one. And most people watching this have their own version of that sentence right now. Renee and I stopped fighting around 2015. That sounds like an improvement. It's the opposite. Couples who are working on something fight. We'd moved into a kind of respectful logistics. Who's got Thursday? Did you sign the thing for Owen's field trip? And there's a particular quality to a house where two people are being efficient with each other. It's very calm. It's the calm of a place where somebody's already halfway out the door, and neither person has said so. She asked me once, 2017 I think, in the kitchen, past 11, "What are we doing this for?" And I said, "I'm building something for us." And she said, "For who, exactly?" "Because I'm standing right here." I didn't have an answer. So I said we'd talk about it that weekend, and we didn't. Because something came up. Because something always comes up. Because something came up is how a man in my position describes his own choices without having to own them. 2 years later, Maddie sat down on that staircase. It was a Tuesday in October 2019. I remember because it was in the middle of an acquisition our firm was doing due diligence on, and I'd been working past 10 most nights for 3 weeks. She came down in pajamas around 9:30 and sat on the third stair, which was her spot. She'd sat there since she was 4, to listen to grown-ups. 9 years old, she had a book with her, but she wasn't reading it. "Dad? Hang on, honey. Dad." I looked up. "Why do you work so much?" And here's what I want to convey about that moment. I was not annoyed. I was pleased, because I had an answer for this. It was a good answer. It was the answer I'd built my entire adult life on, and I'd never had a chance to say it directly to the person it was supposedly for. I said, "Because I'm doing it for you, sweetheart, so you can have things I didn't have." She thought about it. Really thought. I could see her working it, the way kids do when they take an adult sentence seriously instead of just absorbing it. Then she said, "But I don't want things. I want you." Not upset, not crying, just clarifying. Like I'd gotten a fact wrong and she was helping me fix it. Like a kid telling you that's not how you play the game, Dad. And then, because she was 9 and it was a school night and she'd said what she came to say, she got up and went to bed. I sat in my office for a long time after she went up. I could hear Renee moving around in the kitchen. I could hear the furnace. And on the monitor in front of me, there was a due diligence checklist with about 40 open items on it. And every one of them felt, in that moment, like something that would still be there in the morning, which is exactly what they were. Here's the honest part, and it's the part I've never been comfortable with. I understood immediately. There was no confusion. What she said was so simple that there was nothing to work out. And I went back to work anyway. I'd like to be able to explain that. The best I've got is this. The truth arrived, and I filed it. I put it in the same place I put my blood pressure and my wife's question in the kitchen, and the photograph from the first grade play. There's a drawer inside a certain kind of person, where true things go to wait, and I had a very full drawer, and I was extremely good at closing it. I did make some adjustments. I want to be fair to myself, because I think the all-or-nothing version of these stories is a lie. I started leaving my phone in the kitchen during dinner. Not every night, but most. I took Maddie to breakfast on Saturdays, just the two of us, at a diner on Meridian. I made about 70% of Owen's games that spring, instead of 50. Small, real changes, and I want to say something about them that I think matters, because it's the thing I got wrong. Those changes were good. They weren't fake. Maddie loved those Saturday breakfasts. But they were changes at the edges of a life whose center I hadn't touched. I was still doing 65, 70 hours. I was still 5 hours of sleep. I was still the guy whose team knew he'd answer at 11 at night, which meant they'd send things at 11 at night, which meant I had to answer. I'd optimized the margins and left the machine running. If you want the single sentence I'd give somebody who's about to make my mistake, it's this one. Adjusting the margins of a life you haven't questioned is how you spend another decade in it, feeling like you're working on yourself the whole time. And then it was March of 2020, and then it was 2021, and I was, briefly, the busiest I had ever been in my life. The pandemic was very good for my career. I know how that sounds. Our client base was mid-market manufacturing and logistics, and between the relief programs, the supply chain restructurings, and 3 distressed acquisitions, our group did more work in 14 months than in the previous 3 years. I got a title, Practice Leader for the region, more money than I'd ever made. And I was working out of a converted guest room 15 feet from my family, which, and anyone who lived it knows this, was not proximity. It was the opposite. It was being visible and unavailable at the same time, which is worse than being gone, because when you're gone, at least nobody's watching you choose. Maddie was 11 by then. She'd knock on the door frame and I'd hold up a finger, 1 second, on a call, and she'd wait, and then she'd drift off. I don't know how many times that happened. Hundreds, probably. That's not a number I arrived at by counting. It's a number I arrived at by understanding what daily means over 14 months. Kids stop knocking. Not dramatically. They just stop. Owen was 13 and had gone almost entirely into his room, which everybody told us was normal for 13. It probably was, but there's a difference between a kid who retreats into his room from a family and a kid who retreats into his room from an empty hallway, and I couldn't have told you which one my son was, and that's the whole indictment right there. Renee was working COVID shifts in labor and delivery. I want to say this plainly, my wife was doing the actual hard thing that year. She'd come home at 7:30 in the morning after 12 hours and sit on the edge of the bed to take her shoes off and sometimes not get any further than that for 10 minutes. And I'd be in the next room on a Teams call about EBITDA adjustments. One morning in February 2021, she came home and I was already at the desk. And she stood in the doorway of the guest room and said, "Curtis, I lost a mother tonight." And I said, "Oh no, hang on, let me finish this thought. I have apologized for that. She's forgiven me for it, I think as much as a person can. But I don't get to unsay it, and I don't want to, because that sentence is the most accurate description of who I was in 2021 that exists. Let me finish this thought. The physical stuff got bad that year too. I was up to about 50 pounds over. The blood pressure medication had been adjusted twice. I had a thing where my left hand would go numb at the desk, which I looked up online and then decided not to think about. I stopped going to Dr. Rao entirely for about 18 months, which is its own kind of statement. And here's what I'd tell you if you'd asked me then, and I'd have believed it. This is temporary. That's the drug. Not money. Most people running at this speed aren't really doing it for money past a certain point. The drug is the belief that you're in a sprint, that there's a finish line, that after this deal, this quarter, this season, you'll downshift and be the person you keep meaning to be. I had been in that sprint for 11 years. On a Thursday in September 2021, I found out how it ends. It wasn't a heart attack. I want to get that out of the way, because that's where everyone's mind goes, and the fact that it wasn't is exactly what makes it worth telling. I was in a conference room downtown, first week back in the office, presenting to a client's board, fourth slide, and I lost the sentence. Not a word. The whole sentence. I knew what I was talking about. I knew the number I was walking toward, and the path from my brain to my mouth was just gone. I stood there, long enough for it to be a thing, long enough for Rich Vandenberg, 68 years old and 2 years from retiring, to say, "Let's take 5, in the voice you use when you're covering for someone." I went to the men's room and put my hands on the counter, and my heart was going like I'd sprinted upstairs, and my left hand was numb, and I could not make myself go back into that room. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 2 hours. The ER at Methodist ran everything: EKG, troponins, CT. And a very tired resident, maybe 32, came in at 11 at night and told me my heart was fine. Then she sat down, which doctors don't do unless they're about to spend more than 90 seconds with you. And she said, "Mr. Nealon, has anybody talked to you about how you're living?" I laughed. Actually laughed. And she didn't. She said, "You have the blood pressure of a much older man, your labs are pre-diabetic, and you had what looks like a panic episode in front of a board of directors. Your heart's fine today. I'm not worried about today." Here's what she said next, and it's the sentence I've repeated more than any other in the last 5 years. "The body doesn't have a way to tell you slow down. It only has a way to tell you stop, and you don't get to pick when it uses it." Renee drove me home at 1 in the morning. Neither of us talked for most of it. Then, somewhere on 465, she said, not angry, which was the frightening part, "I need you to know I've been making a plan. For if you keep going, I haven't decided anything, but I've been making a plan. That's what it took. Not my daughter on the staircase in 2019. Not my wife in the kitchen in 2017. Not 8 years of a doctor telling me numbers. It took my body failing publicly and my wife telling me, calmly, at 1 in the morning on an interstate, that she'd been quietly preparing for a life without me in it. I need to say something about that, because I think there's a lot of shame available here, and shame is useless. I have thought hard about why I couldn't hear it earlier, and the answer isn't that I didn't love my family. The answer is that stopping meant standing in a room with my father in his dim kitchen. Every time I considered slowing down, some part of me, the 13-year-old, went straight to, "And then what? And then the floor drops, and then you're him." Working 80 hours a week wasn't ambition, it was the most sophisticated avoidance strategy I have ever constructed, and it came with a title and a bonus and everyone I knew telling me I was doing great. That's what makes it so hard to see. Nobody stages an intervention for the guy who's succeeding. I took a leave. 8 weeks, starting the first week of October 2021. I want to tell you what those 8 weeks were actually like. Because the montage version, man rediscovers life, learns to bake bread, is a lie. And it's the kind of lie that makes people feel broken when their own version is uglier. The first 2 weeks were the worst weeks of my adult life. I didn't know what to do with my hands. That's the closest I can get to describing it. I'd get up at 5:40 because my body still did that, and there was nothing. And by 9 in the morning, I'd have this rising physical panic, not emotional, physical, in my chest and my jaw, that I later learned is what happens when a person who has used constant motion to outrun something finally stops moving. I was irritable in a way that scared me. I snapped at Owen over a dish in the sink on day 4, and he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on my son's face, which was, there he is, and he's home all the time now. I started seeing a therapist named Gordon Petrakis the second week, mostly because Renee made the appointment and I didn't have the standing to refuse. First session, he asked what I did for a living. I gave him the title. He asked what I'd do if I didn't do that. I sat there for probably 40 seconds. He said, "Take your time." I said, "I don't have an answer." He said, "I know, that's the work." Here's the thing that came out of those 8 weeks, and it took most of them to arrive. I had been telling myself I worked for my family, and that was maybe 15% true. What was actually true is that work was the only place I knew how to be a person with worth. At the office, I was legible. There were metrics. Somebody could look at me and say this man is valuable and prove it with a number. At home, worth doesn't work like that. Being a father to an 11-year-old is not a measurable output. You cannot bill it, you cannot get promoted for it, and nobody sends you an email at the end of a Saturday saying you did that well. So I'd been quietly avoiding the arena where I couldn't score, and hiding in the one where I could, and calling it sacrifice. That's the piece I'd want somebody to hear at hour 6 of a Sunday in an empty office. Ask yourself honestly whether you're there because they need what you're building, or because it's the only room where you're sure you're worth something. I asked Maddie about the staircase in week 6. She was 11. We were driving to get her a winter coat. I said, "Do you remember, a couple years ago, you asked me why I worked so much?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "I've been thinking about what you said." And she said, "I figured you didn't hear me." She wasn't being cruel. She just concluded, at 9 years old, that she'd said the truest thing she had, and it hadn't landed, and she'd made her peace with it, and moved on. Kids do that. They adjust their expectations down, and they don't tell you they've done it. That's the thing I'm never getting back. Not the years, you can build something after. It's that for 2 years my daughter walked around understanding that her father hadn't heard her. I pulled into the parking lot of a Kohl's and told her I had heard her, and that I'd been too scared to do anything about it, and that I was doing something about it now. 11-year-olds are not sentimental. She said, "Okay," and then she asked if she could get the gray one instead. I went back in December, and I want to be honest about what happened, because the story where a man returns transformed and everyone applauds is not what occurs in an actual firm. I went to Rich Vandenberg and told him I was restructuring how I worked. Not leaving. Restructuring. No email after 7. Real vacation, phone off, someone else covering. 2 client relationships handed off. I'd take a step back from the practice leader role. Rich was decent about it. He was genuinely decent. And he also said the thing that everyone in his position says, which was, just so you understand the trade-off. I understood the trade-off. That's the honest part of this story, that I don't think people say enough. There was a real trade-off, and I paid it, and it was not free. My compensation went down about 30% over 2 years. That's not a small number. We refinanced. We sold Renee's car and bought a used one. Owen went to a state school, and I want to be careful because he'll tell you he's happy there. But there was a version of that decision 3 years earlier that would have gone differently, and both of us know it. The subtler cost is that within about 18 months, I stopped being the guy. Not fired. Not sidelined exactly. Just, the calls that used to come at 9 at night started going to someone else. A very talented 38-year-old named Priya Ramaswamy, who is now doing what I did and doing it well, and who I have wanted to sit down with more than once. There's a grief in that nobody prepares you for. You do the healthy thing, and then you have to watch someone else be what you were. And some part of you, a small, ugly, honest part, misses it. Not the hours, the mattering. I sat with that for about 1.5 years, and I want to say clearly that during most of it, I was not sure I'd made the right call. That's the part these stories always leave out. There were months in 2022 where I'd be home at 6, present, phone in the kitchen, doing everything I'd said I wanted, and I'd feel a low hum of failure the entire evening, because I'd traded a thing the world scores for a thing it doesn't. Nobody sends you a bonus letter for being at dinner. And here's where the actual turn happened, and it wasn't planned. In early 2023, a client of ours, a family-owned logistics company in Kokomo, hit a crisis. The founder, a man named Walt Braddock, had a stroke at 61, and the succession was a mess. I was on it because I'd known that company for a decade, and in a conference room in Kokomo, his son Trey said something to me while we were waiting on a call. He said, "My dad hasn't taken a vacation since 2004. He used to say he was building this for us." That sentence went through me like a rail spike. I said, "Can I tell you something that isn't accounting advice?" And I told him. The staircase, the conference room, the resident at Methodist, the 30%. We talked for 2 hours. Nothing about the transaction. 2 weeks later, he called and asked if I'd do that with his leadership team. Not the numbers. The other thing. I said I wasn't qualified. He said, "You're the only person who said any of this to me who actually did the job. Everybody else who tells my dad's guys to slow down is somebody who never had to make a payroll." I drove back to Indianapolis that night and didn't turn the radio on the whole way. That's the part of this I most want you to take, and it's the opposite of what a story like this usually delivers. I didn't quit accounting to go find myself. I'm still a CPA. I still do the work. What changed is what the work is for, and it turns out that's not a small change. It's the only one that matters. I built a practice inside the firm, over about 2 years, around owner transitions in family businesses. Succession? Yes. The technical piece, the valuations, the tax structure. But the actual value I bring, the thing clients call me about, is that I'm the guy who sits across from a 58-year-old founder who hasn't taken a real week off since the Bush administration and says, "What is this for? And who's still around to receive it?" Nobody in my industry has that on a business card. I bill fewer hours than I did in 2019, and I have never been more useful in my life. Before I go on, something I want to say to whoever's actually watching this at 11 at night with a laptop still open in the other room. I know the arithmetic you're running. I know it feels like slowing down is a luxury for people whose mortgage is smaller than yours. I'm not going to tell you the money isn't real. It was real for us, 30% real. I'm telling you the sprint you think you're in has no finish line, because I ran that exact sprint for 11 years, and the only thing that ever stopped it was my body doing it for me in front of a board of directors. If you've made it this far with me, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and join us every day, because there's a piece of this I got wrong for another full year after I thought I'd figured it out, and it's the piece almost nobody talks about. I thought the problem was hours, so I fixed hours. 65 down to about 45. And for a while things were better. And then around the middle of 2023, Renee said something that landed almost as hard as the staircase. She said, "You're home more. You're not more here." Because I'd cut the hours and kept the operating system. I was still doing everything at 90% throttle. I'd come to Owen's things and spend the drive planning the week. I'd sit at dinner and manage the conversation like a meeting. Moving it along, keeping it efficient. I had gotten my time back and was still spending it like a man with a cue. Gordon put it well. He said, "You've reduced the input. You haven't changed the relationship you have with your own attention." That took another year, and it is genuinely the harder work. Hours are a calendar problem. Attention is a character problem. What it looked like? Practically, no phone in the car, ever. A rule that when someone in my house is talking to me, I put down whatever's in my hands. Physically put it down, because the hands teach the mind. Sunday completely offline, which I failed at for about 6 months before it took. And sleep. 7 hours, non-negotiable, which sounds like the least profound item on this list, and was the single change that altered the most. I had spent a decade treating sleep as the budget line you cut, and it turns out almost everything I thought was a character flaw. The short fuse with Owen, the 60% listening, the inability to sit through a movie, was substantially a man running on 5 hours for 11 years. I want to give you the ledger, because I think people deserve the real numbers and not the inspirational version. What it cost? About 30% of my income, permanently. A career trajectory that would have made me managing partner of the office by 55. That's gone, and it's not coming back. And I still get a small sour feeling in November, when the promotions get announced. Owen's college was different than it would have been, and I lost the identity of being the guy who could carry anything, which was the identity I'd built since I was 13, and losing it hurt more than the money by a wide margin. What it gave back? I'm down 41 pounds, off one blood pressure medication, lower dose on the other, A1C normal since 2023. Dr. Rao, who I see regularly now, told me at my last physical that I'd probably added years, and she said it in the flat way she says everything, which is how I knew she meant it. Renee and I are, I think, in the best years we've had. Not because we fixed something dramatic, because we started fighting again. Actual fights about actual things. That's the tell. The efficient politeness is gone. Owen is 20. He came home last summer and we rebuilt the deck together over 4 weekends. And somewhere in the second weekend, he started talking. Not about anything important, just talking. The way a kid does when they've decided you're available. He hadn't done that in probably 7 years. I got about 11 hours of my son that month, and I would trade every dollar of that 30% for those 11 hours, without a half second of thought. Maddie's 16. And here's the thing about Maddie, which is harder. She's fine. She's more than fine. But there's a slight formality between us that I don't have with Owen, a tiny distance, and I know exactly where it comes from. It comes from a 9-year-old on a staircase who said the truest thing she had and watched her father close the door. I don't get to fix that with a speech. I tried a version of the speech more than once, and what I learned is that a kid who has already adjusted their expectations doesn't get them back because you explained yourself well. What I get to do instead is show up, on time, phone in the car, for the next however many years, and let the accumulated evidence do slowly what apology can't do at all. She asked me last fall to help her with a school project on career choices, and she interviewed me, and one of her questions was, "What would you tell someone starting out?" And I said, "Whatever you build it so it doesn't require you to be absent from the people you're building it for. If it does, it's not what you think it is." She wrote it down. Then she said, "That's good. Did you always think that?" And I said, "No. You told me that. When you were 9. She looked at me for a second and said, "I did?" She didn't remember saying it. That's the part that stays with me. The sentence that redirected my entire life, that I have now said out loud to probably 200 business owners in 3 states, was a throwaway line from a 9-year-old who'd forgotten it by the time she was 16. She wasn't being wise. She was just describing what was in front of her, accurately, with nothing invested in the outcome. Kids do that. It's the last thing we lose. Walt Braddock died in 2024, 3 years after the stroke, at 64. I went to the funeral in Kokomo. Trey gave the eulogy, and he told a story about being 7 and going into the office with his father on a Saturday and getting to run the postage meter, and how that was one of maybe 4 memories he had of the two of them alone together before he was an adult. He said it kindly. He wasn't attacking his father. He was just, that's what he had. 4 memories from a man who worked 40 years to build something to hand to that exact son. I sat in that church and thought, that's the whole thing, right there. That's what nobody puts in the business books. Walt Braddock built a company worth $11 million and left his son 4 memories, and the $11 million is real. It's paying for Trey's kids' educations right now. But nobody at that funeral stood up and talked about the balance sheet. Trey runs the company now. He also, since 2023, takes 2 full weeks off in the summer with his phone off, which I know because I helped him build the coverage plan that makes it possible. That's not a heroic act. It's a scheduling decision. But it's the kind of scheduling decision that determines what your kid says about you in a church in 30 years. I've done about 60 of these engagements now, and there's a pattern I want to give you, because it's the most useful thing I've got, and it took me 60 rooms to see it. 60 rooms, 3 states, mostly men between 50 and 65, who built something from nothing and cannot put it down. And almost every one of them says the same sentence. Some version of, "I'm doing this for my family." And in almost every case, when you sit with it for 2 hours, the thing under it isn't the family at all. It's a fear from somewhere around age 12 or 13. A father who lost work. A house that got sold. A mother counting money at a table. Something that taught them the floor could drop before they were old enough to argue with it. And they've been running from that 12-year-old's fear ever since, at speed, and dressing it in a language everyone applauds. I ask one question in those rooms now, and it's not a clever one. I ask, "What's the number where you'd stop?" And I wait, because almost nobody has one. They'll name a figure and then immediately explain why that figure isn't really enough given the tax treatment, or the second location, or what the industry's doing. And somewhere in the middle of that explanation, most of them hear it themselves. There is no number. There was never going to be a number. That's the whole diagnosis. And it takes about 90 seconds to reach, if you're willing to sit through the silence. I'm not a therapist. I say that in every room. But I can say to a man across a conference table, I did that for 11 years, and here's the number it cost, and here's what my daughter said to me on a staircase, and here's what happened to my hand. I've had 2 of them cry. I've had more than a few tell me they'd never said any of it out loud. And I've had maybe 4 or 5 call a year later to tell me what changed. I'm not going to pretend I fixed those men. Most of them are still going hard, because most people don't change, and I, of all people, am in no position to be smug about how long it takes. But this is the work now. And the strangest part, the part that took me the longest to accept, is that it is the same job I trained for. I still open the financials. I still model the transaction. It's just that I finally understand what the numbers are actually a record of. They're a record of what a person spent their one life on. My father died in 2019, 5 months before Maddie sat down on that staircase. He was 71. He got work again, eventually. 1989, a maintenance job at a hospital, and he stayed 22 years and retired from it. So the story has a decent ending, on paper, but he never got the thing back that the plant took, and I watched him not have it for 30 years. And I built my entire life around making sure it never happened to me. I understand now that I spent 11 years running from my father's kitchen and ended up doing something he never did, which was miss my own children while standing in the same room as them. He was broke and present. I was solvent and gone. I don't think one of those is obviously better than the other, and I'd have told you at 40 that it wasn't close. I keep the photograph from Owen's first grade play in my desk drawer. Not to punish myself. I did that for about 2 years and it accomplished nothing. I keep it because it's accurate. That's what it looked like. A man in the 3rd row, lit from below. If you're watching this and something in it has been landing uncomfortably, I'm not going to tell you to quit your job. Most people can't, and the ones who can usually shouldn't. What I'd ask you to do is smaller and harder. Find the 13-year-old. Figure out what he or she is still afraid of, and whether you're still running from it at 50. Because you will not out-earn that fear. I promise you that. I made partner, and it didn't touch it. I made practice leader, and it didn't touch it. The only thing that ever touched it was sitting still long enough to look at it, which is the one thing the running is designed to prevent. And listen to the 9-year-olds in your life. Not because they're wise, they're not. Because they're the only people left who will describe you accurately and have nothing to gain from it. Mine told me she didn't want things. She wanted me. Took me 2 years and one very bad Thursday to hear it. You might have less time than that. Most of us do and don't know it. If this one meant something to you, stay with us, follow the channel, and if you know 5 people who need to hear it, send it to them today. You already know exactly who they are. Leave a comment and tell me what your version of after tax season is, and how long you've been saying it. And if there's a story from your own life you think belongs here, tell me that one too. I'm listening for the next one.